Hey there, gamer, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to cover expeditions in New World and give some information to them, to help out new and returning players. I'm your host, Dirty Henry, aka Renee. Let's get this started. Expeditions are classic dungeons. It's PvE content that you can complete as a group to get valuable equipment. The first of these expeditions can be played from level 25. You'll need to function well as a group to be able to complete the lurking challenges and defeat the final boss of a dungeon. The content is played with a group of 5, with a healer, a tank, and 3 people who are responsible of dealing damage. The player level for these dungeons are recommendations from me. You can also participate on a lower level, but then it becomes more difficult. Now that you know what a dungeon is, the next question is, what expeditions are there? 6 different expeditions can be played in New World, with the following number 7 coming with the release of Brimstone Sands update. In preparation for expeditions, I recommend having some basic foods for health or mana replenishment, but also healing and regeneration potions. Of course, you will need more advanced supplies the higher dungeon content you run. For example, honing stones for more damage, coatings to pump damage further against certain types of enemies, warding potions to decrease damage inflicted by specific enemies. Now let me name and talk about the current expeditions in-game and explain what is best against the different enemy types. The first dungeon is the Amrhein Excavation. The dungeon lets you solve minor puzzles, kill monsters, and fight bosses. The location of this expedition is in Windsward. Recommended level, level 25 and above. Enemy types in this dungeon are Lost and Ancients. The Lost subtype enemy is weak to strike damage, ice damage, and nature damage. The Ancients are exposed to strike, void, and lightning damage. First boss is one of the ghosts named Nakashima. He has different attacks that you as a player will have to dodge. If one of your group member dies, they can simply run back to the boss from the dungeon's last checkpoint. But you shouldn't get used to this tactic, because it no longer works with the second boss. The second and last boss in the expedition is Simon Grey. He's a heavy armored giant and hits clumsy and slow, but all the harder when you can't dodge. At some point, the boss pukes on the floor, while at the same time spawns little lost helplings that will feed on his puke. I know, it's disgusting. And become enraged, making them faster and deal more damage. You want to ensure to kill these before they feast, or taunt them and keep your healer alive. Next dungeon, the Destroyed Obelisk. This dungeon not only demands your sword arm, but also your brain cells, because if you fall for the Obelisk's lasers, you die instantly. The location for this expedition is in Everfall. Recommended player level, 35 and above. The enemy types in this dungeon are Skeletons and Ancients. The Skeleton subtype is weak to strike damage, ice damage, and nature damage. This also applies to the Ancients. 2 bosses with different mechanics await you in this dungeon. Beware of the light barriers. These lights will kill you instantly if your character touches them. The first boss of the dungeon will constantly summon his adds. If you keep your distance and dodge, the boss Electos should not pose any challenge. The second and last boss is Grengul, who brings a massive greatsword into the fight. In his first phase, you will have to do as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. Your tank should prio the boss during the summon DPS check. In the second phase, the boss will start leaping around the room, and emits a shockwave when he lands. You should avoid this, which is quite difficult, but you'll learn. After a few jumps, he stops and splits into 2 opponents. Kill both of them, and then the adds he summons. After this, he starts leaping again. Repeat the phase until Grengul falls, and you have completed the encounter of the dungeon. Next dungeon, the Depths. The location for this expedition is in Restless Shores. Recommended player level is level 25 and above. Enemy type, Corrupted. Corrupted enemies are prone to thrust damage, nature damage, and arcane damage. The area is a submerged ruin underground, where the corruption has begun to manifest itself. You must solve puzzles that lead you to the two bosses in the depths. This time the bosses have a familiar face. Captain Thorpe awaits you in the depths as the final boss, who made your life difficult at the beginning of your game. The other boss is Azamela. She is armed with a staff and will give you a hard time during her 3 phases. The first is an add and DPS phase. In the second phase, you will have to coordinate your group and split. The first group will maintain the current platform, dealing damage to summoned corruption bombs, while the other group uses teleporters to gain access to a separate platform. Take down 2 guards and destroy the corrupted bubble via interacting with the object. After this is done, rinse and repeat. In the next and last boss fight of the dungeon, reactions are most important. Thorpe is a fast opponent who will strike mercilessly if you are too slow. This encounter is mainly a dodge and DPS check. Watch out and take care. The next dungeon is one of my favorites. It's the Dynasty Shipyard. The location of this expedition is an Ebonscale Reach. Recommended player level 55 and above. Enemy types are Dynasty and Corrupted. The enemy subtype Dynasty are corrupted beings and will be treated as corrupted. Damage strong against these are Thrust, Nature, and Arcane damage. In this dungeon, you have to overthrow the Empress of Ebonscale in an Asian temple. You fight against all kinds of opponents and a total of 9 different foes. 2 are defined as main bosses and 7 are mini-bosses. The Isabella boss fight has 2 major phases. First, you will fight against Isabella, and then eventually she will leave and unleash 2 of her pets. Once you have finished Isabella, continue through to the end, where you will meet Empress Zhao as the last boss. The main thing in this fight is to avoid damage as much as possible, because the good lady and the dragons she summons really hurt, so you should make sure that your tank always keeps the lady's aggro. She also summons adds. You should kill them as soon as Zhao is floating in the air. If you stick to these rules, it's easy. Next dungeon, Lazarus Instrumentality. Location, in Reek Water. Recommended player level, 60. Enemy type, Skeletons. The enemy subtype Skeleton is weak against Strike, Void, and Lightning damage. In this dungeon, you will go into an old ruin, where all kinds of skeletons want to make your life difficult. Even the first opponents who come running at you are tough. After that comes the first puzzle you will have to solve. You will have several attempts to do this, but note, each time you put in the wrong solution, new skeletons will spawn against you. Next up is Cilia, the first boss, who takes the form of a large Medusa. The boss will gain a passive increase to her damage. The party has to use orbs to make her switch between physical attacks and magical attacks. Make sure to not spread too far, since one of her skills marks your last location and you must run out of an AoE damage to avoid a total party kill. Mostly this boss is a large DPS check. If you coordinate well, this boss is no problem. Once you have defeated Cilia, only the final boss of the dungeon remains, who goes by the name of Chardis. Chardis is a large golem that watches over the Well of Lazarus. He is slow but deals a lot of damage. Also, he is a unique boss type, since he is not prone to any type of weapon damage or magic damage, meaning he is not strong or weak against any damage type. Except for a small orb placement phase, this boss is straightforward DPS check. Do mind your player's placement. Preferably, you want your melee DPS to run a hatchet, since with the right passives, they won't be knocked away or interrupted in their damage dealing. When you have defeated this powerful opponent, you have also mastered the first stage of level 60 expeditions. Last of the dungeons before the Brimstone Sands update is the Gardens of Genesis. The dungeon's location is in Eden Grove. Recommended player level, also level 60. Damage strong against these enemies are slash and fire damage. In this dungeon, tricky puzzles await you again, which must be solved before you can progress. It is all about the fire, where you must ignite things in order to continue. Several mini-bosses and elite opponents will make this hard for you, including enemies that explode when they die, so take care. The bosses that await you afterwards are the Caretaker and the Blighted Greenskeeper. They are some of the hardest encounters you can experience in New World currently. Several phases, as well as different mechanics, have to be mastered that you can conquer the Garden of Genesis. Taxodius. This sub-boss is fought in a medium-sized circle room. Fairly simple, and he has a stagger bar. It's a DPS check. The Caretaker. This boss is fought in a large-sized circle room, and has 2 phases. We always tanked him in the middle of the room to ensure a clean turnover to his second phase. The second phase is a timed DPS check. The group must take care of spawned enemies while the tank faces the boss alone in the summoned arena. After completing this first summoned arena, the Caretaker will begin to use his abilities. Make sure you do not get hit by the wave, as it can easily kill a light-geared player. The Blighted Water quickly causes you to get the Blighted Infection if you stand too long inside of it. This affliction drastically reduces incoming healing and deals damage over time, and must be avoided by not stepping into the bright-colored water. After this phase, interrupt his channeled End of Life ability, and handle the ads spawned during the arena phase. The last boss is the Blighted Greenskeeper. This boss has hard-hitting abilities, and the tank will have to make sure to position the boss accordingly so the group doesn't suffer from cleave damage. Greenskeeper will go underground and target random players, trying to impale them with her spiked tail. In this phase, she also spawns low HP minions that hit pretty hard. Kill them quickly. Movement is key here. Quick reference, she will mark one random player with an AoE attack. The marked player must lay out the AoE from the party. Next phase is called Boulder Drop. It is a move check phase where players have to take cover from Greenskeeper Scream Wave to avoid a total party kill. The rest is a simple DPS check. Congrats! You have conquered all expeditions. If you have any questions or just like to jump in and say hello, I do stream on Twitch, and I would be very happy if you could come in and say hello. With that being said, I wish you all a wonderful day. Until next time.